Hey everybody, so today I'm here to share with you guys how I go about exclusively pumping while I'm out and about. You guys are very interested in my routine when it comes to feeding, storing, pumping, everything while we are traveling. I say that very lightly because we don't really do a bunch of it or for that long, but I will get into that here in a second. So I did ask you guys for questions over on Instagram, and I will also be answering those at the very end of this video, but I thought first and foremost I should give a little insight as to who I am, what I do, what's typical for us. So I'm an exclusively pumping mom for our 9-month-old daughter. Exclusively pumping means that I do not nurse her at all. I strictly use my pump to breastfeed. So for that reason, I do have to pump, and I also have to bring bottles to pour that into, and I also have to find storage for that milk. So it is also not typical for us to spend any more than 6 to 7 hours being out of the house. We have never spent the night somewhere with our girls. We've never gone long stretches of time traveling away from home or anything like that. And it's honestly even the rare occasion that we are out that long, 6-7 hours. Most of the time, it's just, a few hours. We're only going about 20 minutes away. It's not really often that we take bigger trips like that, and I know that probably doesn't even sound like a big trip to some, but I'm just breaking down my usual routine, and then I'll get into more of the hypothetical questions at the end of the video because you guys did ask those over on Instagram. So I am currently pumping every 4 hours. Now, it depends on my routine as far as pumping goes with what the drive looks like to wherever we're going. If we are going to be in the car driving to our destination for over an hour, I will wait to pump. I do that so that whenever we arrive to our destination, my timer for that 4 hours starts then, and I can have that whole time to do whatever I want. Whether we would be going to the zoo or if we were just going to the park or anything like that, obviously I want to give myself the longest stretch of time to be with my family and be present with them and not have to take breaks like that. If the drive is shorter than an hour long, then I will pump right before we leave the house. That way my timer starts basically when we're leaving and we have the entire time that way. Now, most of the time, that's what I do because we are only going 20 minutes away. So that basically leaves me with 3 hours and 40 minutes. That's a lot of time to do, basic stuff around where we live. That's plenty of time for me usually. Like I said, if we are going to be driving over an hour away, we will be out for 6 to 7 hours. I will wait to pump until we're in the car. And when I am out and about in the car pumping, I do give myself an entire hour to do that. Because even though it doesn't take me that long, it only takes me about 30-40 minutes at most normally, but you never know when you're going to run into a clog, something's not going to work right. You might just be having a hard time emptying. Things can come up. It's normal. But I don't want to spend any more time in the car once we get there, and most of the time, honestly, we're already running late. So when we show up somewhere, we probably just want to get going. So for that reason, I allot myself an hour. So say the drive to wherever we're going is 2 hours long, I would wait until we've already been in the car for an hour to start pumping. That way, I've got the time to pump. Hopefully, I'm finished, I'm getting the bottles done, and everything's good to go. That way, we can get the kids out of the car seat and get on to whatever we were going to. So as far as what I'm packing and what I use and things like that, let's back up a little bit and go to that scenario of pumping before we leave the house. Now, if that's the case, I'm really only worried about bringing a little extra milk and a feeding bottle. So typically what I like to do is make sure that Lexi is fed before we even leave the house, make sure that she's good to go, so that way she doesn't have to eat for a while. So because of that, I will bring just an empty, clean bottle. These are the bottles that she takes. They are the Juvie glass bottles. Unfortunately, they don't make these anymore, or I would link them for you guys. But then in a separate bottle or bag, whatever I'm feeling at the time, whatever I used when I was pumping, I will put the milk in here, and then that way I will pour it into here whenever she's ready to eat. I do that so I can keep the least amount of air in a bottle. So as you can see, there's basically like maybe half an inch of air in this bottle between the top of the lid and the milk itself. The camera is slanted a little bit downwards, so honestly, it's not even showing the correct way. But regardless, there's about a ½ inch of air sitting on top of the milk. And if I were to put that in here, there would be a ton of extra air in there. And I like to do this because keeping the least amount of air in your bottles, bags, whatever, will keep your milk fresher longer. Now, the CDC in America does have guidelines for breast milk storage. I will link those down below. They actually have a few different PDFs that are pretty nice. If you want, you could have them sent out and made into a magnet and put it right on your fridge. I thought that was pretty neat of them to suggest. And also keep in mind that if you have a preemie or a medically fragile infant, these guidelines are going to be different. You're going to want to consult with an IBCLC and also their medical team. But just know that those guidelines are out there, know about them, but I'm telling you what works for me. So this is the way I do it because I find the least air that I have in there, the longer my milk lasts. So this is what I typically do. If I'm pumping right before we leave the house, this is really all I'm bringing. It's all I've ever really needed to bring. So say we have the situation of I am pumping while we are in the car, then I will go ahead and I will bring however many empty bottles is appropriate. She eats every 3 hours, so I'll just times that accordingly, obviously. And then as far as it comes with storage, I actually bring breast milk storage bags. One thing I forgot to grab today, but I use the Medela breast milk storage bags. I'll have them linked down below. I like for it to be a little bit more compact. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit more of a visual representation of what I'm talking about with the air and the milk. So as you can see in here, there is about a 1/2 inch of air, like I mentioned, and that's the max that I will allow in my bottles typically, as long as I'm the one who's putting them away and not like my husband or anything. But this is also a bottle that's filled basically all the way full. You see there's a tiny little air bubble in there, but it is basically all the way full. And I have the lid on. If I can do this, I will do this because that's even less air than in that. But, you know, I made what I made and that's the way I would fill it up. However, there are some times where I will fill a bottle up and it be about half empty, or there's definitely more than 1/2 inch of air. And with this, I would tell you to take this out of the bottle and I would pour it in a breast milk storage bag, even if you're not going to freeze it. It will do your milk so much better and it will last longer if you get the air out of there. When I set bottles around like this, I was noticing they were spoiling so much faster. So try to get the air out. I do things this way to try and eliminate that whole trying to keep the milk cold and then warming it up once it's ready to feed and stuff like that. She really likes fresh breast milk. She doesn't like for it to be too cold. She doesn't like when we warm it up. So for that reason, I try to keep it at room temperature as best as possible. Another reason for the whole air thing. I find as long as I don't have a ton of air in the bottles that I can get my milk to last around 4 hours. So I'm comfortable carrying the milk inside this container waiting for her to eat at around 3 hours. Perfectly fine. When I go to feed it, there's no smell or bad taste to it. So it's still good to use. So this way I'm not worrying about bringing a cooler pack, keeping it cold, anything like that, and then I don't have to worry about somehow warming it up. So I like just sticking this right in the side of my diaper bag and keeping it as is, as long as, like I said, the air is taken out of it. So that's what I typically do. I don't normally bring cooler packs or ice packs or worry about anything like that. Now I will say if I am going to pump in the car and I know that I'm going to have more than the fresh milk that she will take during a feeding, I will go ahead and I will pack a cooler bag. This is the one I use from Medela. And then my favorite ice pack that I have had for a while is actually the Medela one. It is very thick, and when you freeze this, it will stay frozen for a very long time. And as you can see, it actually has the divots cut out of it, so it actually fits a bottle if you wanted to use that. But like I said, I typically don't. I use breast milk storage bags. So what I do is I sit this flat or horizontal in the bag like this, and then I will lay the breast milk storage bags over top of it. The breast milk storage bags are also less of a barrier. That way it's keeping cold even better. And then I just zip it up and I just keep it in here. Breast milk in a container like this is good for up to 24 hours. And at the end of that 24 hours, just make sure it gets into a fridge or a freezer. So that's what I do when I'm out and about. That's typically all I ever need to do. Obviously, when I get home, any excess breast milk in those storage bags, I go ahead and I move to the freezer and I'll pump as soon as I get home. It doesn't really matter if my timer is up or not. Once I get home, I always just go ahead and pump. I want to make sure that, you know, if my schedule had been erratic or if it was just weird that day, I just like to kind of press reset. There's not a bunch of frills or, you know, extra stuff involved. And I have my bag, which is just the Medela Sonata bag that I still like. But honestly, I wouldn't even recommend that you go out and buy this $50 bag. Any bag will work. Most of the stuff that I take fits right into my diaper bag, which I also like. So let's get into the questions now, because that is what I typically do. That's the extent of it. But you guys had a lot more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and answer those now. So someone asked, what size juvie glass bottles do we use? These are the ones she typically eats out of during the day. These are 5-ounce bottles, but at nighttime, I think they are 8-ounce bottles, or maybe 9, I can't remember. But we have 2 bigger bottles that we use for her night feeds, but typically just this, because she still only eats between 3 to 4 ounces, most of the time just 3. She is getting close to 10 months old. A lot of breastfed babies only eat every 3 hours, only a few ounces at a time, completely normal. So someone did ask what I would do if we were out all day long, and that is my 6 to 7 hour kind of routine that I gave you guys. And then the next question is more about the law. I know I can nurse anywhere, but what about pumping? So in case you didn't know, in all 50 states, you are allowed to nurse in public, and there's no consequences for that. However, I think it's just because it's a gray area, there's not a lot known about pumping. I have heard stories go both ways. I've heard of stories where people have been cited for public indecency because they've been pumping in their car, minding their own business, which is absolutely absurd to me. But I've also heard of people being reported and the police officers being like, clearly you're not violating anything, you're trying to feed your child. I think it's just because it's a gray area, but honestly, I'm not even sure if it's that, because I've also seen people removed from public places, even though they're protected by law for nursing. So honestly, I think the best that you can do is to look up the laws in your state, have them printed out, readily available on you, and do whatever you're comfortable with. Honestly, is my recommendation. I really feel like you should do you, and should somebody give you a hard time, I don't think that's right. I don't think that the law is specific enough to tell you that you are breaking it, but I'm also not an attorney, and I don't know the law in every single state, so I'm not 100% on this. I don't know the laws of each and every state. Maybe some do cover pumping. Now, pumping in the workplace is referenced quite a bit. And again, you're just going to have to look into your particular one. And again, I would just print those out, have them on you so you're able to, address any concerns that way. I'm sorry I can't be more help, but honestly, that's what I do. I have the laws printed for Ohio, which is the state that I live in, and I happen to pump covered because that's what I like to do, and I've never had any issues, but I am sorry that I can't be more help. The next question is, say you were away for a few days, what's the best way to keep the milk good? So if we were going somewhere for a few days, I think it just, again, depends on all the specifics. If we were going to stay at someone's house, I would just obviously make sure that they're okay with me storing breast milk in their fridge and freezer. But if we were to stay at a hotel or something like that, then I would of course either make sure that it had a mini fridge in which it also had a freezer and I could use that, or I'd be buying a mini fridge and taking it with me. That way I can keep it. And then on the way home, I would just pack all of that into a cooler that had some really good ice packs in it and take it home. So that's what I would personally do if we were out for several days. The next question has to do with airlines and asking me if there is regulations, and there is, but the TSA is pretty good about breast milk. Again, I have heard some horror stories and people having to dump it or them testing it, which then you're not comfortable obviously feeding it to your child, and so many different things. But I think the thing here to understand is that some people just aren't educated on what they are supposed to be doing. Even though they should be knowing the rules and regulations in which they're supposed to enforce and abide by, some of them don't know. So having them printed out so you can hand them a copy, and obviously make sure that it's not from, mommyblog234.com, make sure you're going to, a legit website, which I will link them down below for you guys to print them off at. But again, I think it just helps to have the TSA printout and showing that you are allowed to have breast milk on flights. And again, I don't fly, so I don't know the best efficient way to do this, but I will link that down below, so hopefully it can be a bit more informative. And, if any of you who fly regularly or travel regularly or pump in public regularly have any tips or advice, please leave it in the comments below, because I don't do that stuff. I'm not 100% educated on it. I don't have the experience, but hopefully someone coming across this video can help you guys a little bit more. The next question is, do you have a bottle warmer in your car, or do you give Lexi the milk cold? No, like I said, I do try and keep everything room temp, so I don't have to worry about that. However, for whatever reason, if you are keeping milk cold, they do make travel bottle warmers, or you can just use hot water, whatever is more readily available. If I had to use frozen or refrigerated, like I said, if I was at someone's house, I would just use warm water and heat it up as though I would at home. But if we were going to be in the car, or at least going somewhere and we would be in the car beforehand, I would use the portable bottle warmer, warm it up before we went, and feed her on our way in, if that makes sense. So I would do that, and then by the time she needs to eat again, which is every 3 hours, I'd just go back out to the car for a break probably at that point, if we weren't already done with whatever we were doing. And don't be afraid to ask for warm water if you're out. You know, if you're somewhere that serves coffee or just any hot beverage, really, honestly, a lot of places should be able to get you a cup of really hot water. If you're just 100% and be like, I have to warm something up for my baby, can you please get me a glass of very hot water? I feel like 9 times out of 10, those places should be able to get that for you. And the last question was, what pumps do I use? This is going to vary given the situation. So if I was going to be gone for days and days at a time, if we were staying somewhere, whatever, I would just take my Lancino Smart Pump 2.0. I would get it, but it's plugged into the wall over there because I still use it. That's my everyday pump. I would just take that because it's basically going to be like normal. It does have the battery pack underneath, so I could use it in the car. I would just treat the whole thing as though we were just moving our situation to a different location for a few days, basically. However, if we were going to be gone for the 6 to 7 hour stretch, I would take my Amita Maya. This is the little guy right in here. Everything, bottles, flange, everything that you need for this pump is fitting right into this cooler bag. That's how small but efficient, because I do love this pump. That's how great this little thing is. Now, if I was just going to pump once and that was it the entire time we were out, no more, no less, I would go ahead and I would bring my Willow. Because I can just stick this right in my bra, there's no tubes, there's no adapter, there's no nothing to worry about. And these are the reusable containers. I don't have all the parts hooked up to it because they were drying and I wanted to make it look whole for this video. But this way, I don't have a ton of other stuff going on either. This is my bottle, my collection bottle, and everything else that I need. And I would just pour this into her feeding bottle. So I would use my Willow if I was only going to pump once while I was out. If I was going to pump several times, be out for 6-7 hours, an all-day event, I'm bringing my Amita Maya. If I was gone for days at a time, I would bring my Lancino 2.0. I know that's a privilege to have all these pumps. The reason why it's possible is because you guys support me and watch my channel. But that is what I would do because it's the most efficient. If you're looking for one answer, if you just were like, I just want one pump that can do it all, Lancino 2.0 is still going to be my recommendation. It's the pump that works best for me and in all those situations. Or the pumpable Super Genie. Again, it's rechargeable. Very similar to it. I like it a lot more for different reasons. Watch the comparison if you've got questions on that. I made one of these years and years ago with Remy, and things have slightly changed, but not by a lot. But I thought I would put a refresher video up for you guys. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching.